Hello and welcome to Close Calls on the 42.e, brought to you in association with Eirsport. You know the scale at this stage. Every week on a Friday we prepare for the biggest sporting event of the weekend and we chat to the hottest pundits in the game. This weekend it is all about Arsenal versus Manchester United in the Premier League tomorrow. A fixture that maybe used to be a little bit more important than it is now, but it's still reasonably exciting. My name is Gavan Casey. I'm joined in 42 Studios by Ryan Bailey, also of the 42. Ryan,
hi Gav. Yeah, good.
Are you excited for the game tomorrow, Ryan?
Yeah, we were just kind of saying on air, or before we came on air there, that this fixture was the marquee one when we were growing up. Like United Arsenal always had so much weight, significance to it. For obvious reasons, I suppose, over the last kind of couple of years, that's kind of been diluted a bit. But again, it's one to get excited about. 5:30 on Saturday's probably not the best time. But yeah, should be a good game tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get United won't come out and park the bus. We'll see.
Well, the man who is here to tell us whether United will park the bus or not is Jack Pitt-Brooke of The Independent. Jack, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am very well, cheers. We might, we'll get to Arsenal United in a second, actually, Jack. We might as well touch upon the World Cup draw while we have you. I know we could have probably claimed you via the granny rule, Jack. I think there might be some Irish in your background somewhere. But from the English perspective, a group containing Belgium, Tunisia, Panama could have been a lot worse, I guess. How are you going to manage to finish third in this one?
Well, yeah, I think we're going to have to give it a really good go. It's not really much to get excited about, is there? Because it's quite, on the surface, it's quite an easy group, although we've certainly said that before. And even the one big team that we're facing, Belgium, is probably the least exciting good team to play, just because they're so familiar. All the players play in the Premier League, and that'll be a good game. But you'd like to think that England and Belgium will both beat Panama and Tunisia in their respective matches, and therefore they'll both go through. And England could even lose to Belgium, and still make it. That said, nothing is funnier to go wrong than the predictions of English pundits about the England team on the day of a draw. So I look forward to this being rubbed in my face in 6 months' time. But yeah, on the surface, you'd have to say it's pretty gentle for Southgate.
Absolutely, I think England and Belgium have played each other 21 times, something like that. Only 2 defeats for England in that sequence, although not too many fixtures recently, obviously. As you mentioned, I suppose England could conceivably lose to Belgium and still go through quite easily. I know we're not going to get ahead of ourselves here, Jack, but maybe we can afford to, as neutrals, as Irishmen. There's potential for a quarter-final against Germany or against Brazil. Those are the kind of fixtures, I suppose, that make a World Cup. Are you able to get excited about that kind of thing, or is it just too soon?
No, I think I'm able to get excited about the prospect of England playing a good team. I figure England are probably, the 7th or 8th best team at the World Cup, and that means that if everything goes as it should do, then England should be able to make it through to the quarters, then probably lose the first good team they play against. And there's no shame in that. Yeah, there's no shame in losing to a team better than us, which is how as long as they avoid. I'd say that the English target at the World Cup will be to avoid an Iceland scenario, to try and play good football, not expect to win it, eventually lose to someone good, and that'll be fine. It's possible that England will play some good stuff as well. The problem is that I think that the defence won't be able to withstand any good opposition attack. Like Germany, Brazil, Spain, France, forget about it.
Do you reckon that there's, I suppose, certainly from watching England over here, it's always interesting to see how the English public is either behind the team or putting the team under serious scrutiny. Recently, to us, I think Ryan might agree, there seems to be almost an apathy towards the team where, Wembley is kind of half full for qualifiers because you're going through. There's not much excitement about a team that is actually brimful of really good talent, young players, Marcus Rashford, Raheem Sterling, players like that. Maybe the most exciting attacking options you guys have had in quite a while, and yet there doesn't seem to be a connection between the team and the country at the moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think my guess is that is to do with the public feeling slightly betrayed. I don't know if that's the right word, or just the sense that the country was so manically behind the team in the late 90s and early 2000s, the kind of golden generation era, and just before then, and it all collapsed. And I think people are now less. I don't know. I don't detect the same kind of national hysteria around the national team That said, if we were to, a few days into the World Cup, England, Tunisia, it'll be crazy. Like all the pubs will shut down. All the everything. The pubs will be busy. Everything else will shut down. And yeah, like I'm presuming that connection, that kind of buzz will come back. But you're right. Like during the qualification campaign, it was really noticeable how, in Wembley the crowds would be. I mean, Wembley wouldn't always be sold out, and even then, like the atmosphere would be dead. It would all be. I mean, I don't mean to sound disparaging, but it would all be families and people who weren't really that into football. Certainly for the home games, like if you get off the tube at Wembley Park when Tottenham are playing, everyone's wearing Tottenham shirts and singing Tottenham songs. But when you get off the tube at Wembley Park when England are playing, it's like families. And then if it's a Thursday or Friday night game, it's people who've come out of work and thought, well, we could go to the pub or we could go and have a few pints at Wembley and watch the game. But there's no sense of bond really, I think, between players and fans. I mean, and then the away crowd is something different, because the away crowd, as you know, is a kind of slightly more like, I don't want to say like hard-edged hooligan element, because it isn't really, but it's kind of more like aggressive young men who want to have 10 pints and offer people out in a market square kind of vibe. And so with those people those fans, maybe they do feel more of an identification with the team. I don't know, but there's overall, you're right that like in the nation in general, that kind of connection between the national team and the fans isn't as strong as it used to be.
Yeah, we've gone through periods of that, I think, ourselves here, Ryan, with the Ireland team. But look, whatever happens with England next year, all of us are behind them 100%, as you might expect. Ryan, speaking of apathy, I personally couldn't give a fiddler's hoot about Arsenal versus Manchester United tomorrow. It was a fixture, as you mentioned, that when we were growing up, you'd be looking forward to it all week. And obviously, like generally speaking, they would have been both title contenders. United might be this year, although for how long we don't know. Jack had a really good column this morning where he spoke about how these two teams now, or these two clubs, have become kind of corporate entities, and that it's the first £1 billion game in terms of revenue for the last year. What's your perception of United, say, at the moment as a club? Like, are we talking about a kind of a similar disconnect between some of the fans that would have grown up watching United, because we now see kids lining up as mascots dressed as X-Men and things like that? It's all gone a bit pukey. Like.
Yeah, for sure. Like, as you kind of touched on, Jack had a great column this morning, but I was actually over at Old Trafford, not in a working capacity last weekend for the Brighton game, and certainly it'd been the first time I'd have been over there for about 2 seasons, and certainly you can see the changes that kind of over the years have developed in terms of the type of supporters, a lot more families, a lot more corporate hospitality, and certainly the way United are playing, I think at the moment, they're kind of running out results under Mourinho. They've won 3 in a row in the Premier League now. You kind of touched on they are kind of involved in a title race, if we can call it that, with City, but they're not playing the way United, and it is such a stereotypical thing to say, or they're not playing the way United traditionally play. Exactly. But tomorrow, going back to tomorrow, like, I mean, it was the marquee fixture. I think it still is. Like, it still carries a lot of weight. You think of United Arsenal fixtures down through the years. You think of Vieira, Keane in the Highbury Tunnel. You think of Will Tord scoring the winner at Old Trafford to finish the league. That the same significance and weight, memorable moments, just hasn't happened in recent seasons. And Arsenal certainly have held a dominance over United at the Emirates over the last couple of seasons. So, interesting one tomorrow. Both come into it in completely different places, I think. While they've both won 3 in a row in the league, Arsenal have really starting to build a bit of momentum now. And you'd imagine that Arsenal will hold the upper hand tomorrow.
Big time, we'll have to see. Jack, take us through your column in The Independent this morning. Very interesting one, but you kind of laid out, I think, your perception of the fixture and both clubs. How do you perceive tomorrow's game now in this modern era?
Well, yeah, I mean, it isn't what it was, which is, it used to be the 2 best teams in the country, and now, I mean, Arsenal haven't really challenged the league for 12, 15 years. And United have had going into their own dip, I think. Although they might yet win the title this year if City collapse. I think one of the problems that I think basically the two clubs have had similar problems. I mean, the first thing is they've been overtaken by Chelsea and Manchester City, and it is unfair to say that it would be unfair not to mention that, because that's Chelsea and Man City have been the biggest problems that Arsenal and United have had to contend with. But I think that Arsenal and United have both gone on a similar path, which is that their success has led to such, and obviously in United's case, this is kind of 3 times as successful as Arsenal have been financially, but their success in the early part of the last decade has been so much that it has made them into this huge global corporate brands who are very keen to pursue fans all over the world and to kind of basically just to stay there. That's what they want, is they just want to stay where they are at the moment more than anything else. And that means that they make cautious decisions, like keeping Arsene Wenger or appointing Louis van Gaal and then Jose Mourinho, kind of 2 big-name managers, but maybe not the kind of youthful manager that would best kind of relaunch Manchester United. Or, in Manchester United's case, buying the most famous players they can find, even if they don't necessarily, fit into the system. Like, I feel like they're making business decisions before they're making football decisions. Certainly in United's case, whereas Arsenal I don't really get the impression they're making any decisions at all. Like, they just want everything to keep. They just want to keep the show on the road. And I get it, but if you look at, say, Chelsea, for example, there are many things you can be critical of Chelsea and Roman Abramovich about, but he's got quite a good idea when it comes to winning titles, which is to start afresh every year or two with a new young manager, and it'll probably work. And if it doesn't work, you get rid of him and you get someone else in, and that works. Like, it's been proven to work. And I just think that with Arsenal United at the moment they just care more about maintaining their current position, not having a Mourinho season where you finish 8th or 10th or whatever, keeping the money flowing in, and if you win, that's nice, but if you don't win, you're in the Champions League next year anyway, the money will keep flowing. That's basically I've kind of sanded a few edges there, the stories are not exactly the same, Arsenal United, but I think they're kind of broadly travelling in the same direction.
That's interesting, yeah. I mean, I wondered when I was reading it, were you being slightly harsh particularly, I suppose, in describing Mourinho's appointment as sort of just recruiting a big name for business reasons? I suppose they kind of tried to go down the young manager route, or really wasn't that young, David Moyes, but he was kind of perceived to be an up-and-comer at the time. Van Gaal, obviously, as you mentioned, was a big name, and it was somebody brought in to right some of the wrongs previously. That didn't quite work out, and Mourinho was then the next step up from that. But, in Mourinho, I don't know. He's a proven winner, obviously. We know that. All the cliches we can use, we can throw them out there about Mourinho again, bar that one kind of blip season at Chelsea. Do you think, though, that United were more concerned about getting a big-name manager in than the results that he's proven to achieve or proven to give a club over the years? And do you feel now that maybe Mourinho is slightly outdated in modern football, given his approach, particularly to some of the away games like tomorrow?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think that is a fair criticism of what I wrote. I do think Mourinho is a bit outdated, and I do think they should have appointed Pochettino or someone more like him. That said, I completely get that a club like United just wouldn't take that risk. If you've got a choice between someone who's won 7 league titles and 20 plus other major trophies, and someone who's won no major trophies, obviously you're going to go for the man with the trophy cabinet. And it's almost so. Maybe I'm setting an unrealistically high standard of making brave decisions for United there, which is easy to do when it's not your money on the line and you don't support United. But yeah, maybe that would have been too brave for them to do. But equally, I do think I am kind of unsold basically on Mourinho's United so far. I haven't been convinced or impressed by anything they've done, and I don't really think they're going to do anything this year either. Yeah,
I think that's fair enough. And I wouldn't even necessarily disagree that Pochettino would have been a better option. Arsenal, Jack, Wenger, I guess, is the antithesis of Mourinho at this stage in that he's no longer winning trophies and yet has remained at the same club for so long. I'm fascinated by this situation with Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez, given that he's come out, or he came out earlier this week and said they will remain at the club beyond January unless something unbelievable happens, and yet you're pretty much resigning yourself to losing them for free next summer. I'm not even sure necessarily if losing them for free is the same type of blow to Arsenal as a club as it might have been in the past, but just the general... I mean, that has to be an issue, surely, within the squad. Maybe not given recent results, but that your two talisman are going to just leave. And it seems to be an unbelievable situation for Arsenal to find themselves in, where there's kind of... It doesn't seem as though there's any way of rectifying it, that they're just going to lose two of the best players in the league.
Yeah, it's really bad. Like, there's no way they can describe it otherwise. I guess the flip side is that they at least have them this year, and they are playing really well. Like Wenger said in August that he thought that the motivation of playing for a lucrative Bosnian move would incentivise the players to play well, and we all laughed. But Ozil's actually playing really, really well at the moment. He was brilliant against Tottenham 2 weeks ago, and then I was there on Wednesday when he kind of took Huddersfield apart single-handedly, and they won 5-0. So Ozil's playing great. I kind of think Sanchez might be playing within himself a bit. He's not really, since he came back from that slight injury he's had, he's not really put it in. Or maybe it was since Chile got knocked out of the World Cup qualifying. He just looked like a bit, he's not really, I mean, because the great thing about Sanchez is he always gives 100%, and yet at the moment he doesn't really look like himself. But yeah, like the problem they're going to have in the summer, and there is a possibility they could sell them in January, and as much as Wenger might say, we won't sell them in January, remember, he spent the whole summer saying that they wouldn't sell Sanchez, and then the last day of the window, he tried to sell Sanchez to City for 60 million. So you can't really believe him when he says that he won't sell them. But if they, on the presumption that they stay, they're going to have to spend a huge amount of money in the summer to replace them. Like, they bought them for a combined 70 million, but that was 4 or 5 years ago. In today's money, though, like, the combined value of players who are good enough to replace Sanchez and Ozil, I mean, you're looking at two £80 million players, aren't you? So it's like £100 million worth of player they've got to buy this summer. And yeah, like I genuinely don't know who they would look at. They would certainly have to be in the Champions League, I think, to have any prospect of getting someone good. I think if they got a good, new, well-respected manager, they would have an even better chance. But then, you know, this week Arsenal announced the arrivals of Sven Mislintat, the new chief scout from Borussia Dortmund, and Ran Leahy, who's the head of football operations, I think, who's basically director of football at Barcelona for years and years. And that is the big job for these two guys. You've got to go and find two world-class players who Arsenal can afford and who want to come to Arsenal, because if they don't replace them, then they're going to be terrible next year.
Yeah, that's pretty much guaranteed. But before we get your predictions for tomorrow, Jack, and how the game is going to go, a reminder to the people at home that we have got a book at the moment, Behind the Lines. It's available in all good bookstores and also available online. We'll be giving away a free copy to one of you guys watching at home. Just send us in your comments, be it a prediction or whatever. Ace Deuce has been in touch. He says that the game definitely hasn't lost its edge. Biggest game of the season for me, although it's definitely lost its steel over the years. I'm not going to lie, I don't know what that means, Ryan. No, but thank you very much to HGs for getting involved. We are also hosting a quiz next Wednesday at 6:30 in Copperface Jack's. Never too early. So what we're doing is make the commenters, Ryan, the 42 commenters, against ourselves. Yeah. There's no fix. We probably won't win, but we're going to take you on anyway. We'll be giving away a free drink, food, and you'll also get a copy of the book as well. €10 in. 10 bob.
Copy of the book, food, drink. And entry into Coppers, so
absolutely.
What more could you want?
You're a natural born salesman, Ryan. Jack, tomorrow's game, I don't know. Like the way United played against Watford during the week, Tuesday night, it seemed actually kind of atypical of Mourinho in a lot of ways. In that, all right, Watford aren't necessarily a sort of a top six club, and it may not seem as a daunting away trip for a club of United stature, and yet under their new manager Marco Silva, they've been motoring along fairly nicely. United played fairly attacking, and certainly when Watford had the ball, it was interesting to see United go kind of man for man and push up the park as opposed to sit back. Danny Murphy touched on that on Match of the Day. Do United revert to type under Mourinho tomorrow, do you think, or since the return of Paul Pogba, can you see them maybe taking a few more chances in big away games?
I think they'll play on the break. I just think that Arsenal aren't great, but I think they're good enough that you wouldn't want to give them any more space than you have to. You know what I mean? Like, it's not worth taking the risk to give them that room. So I think United will revert to type. I think they'll sit deep and they'll try and hit them on the break, and it could work because Arsenal have been quite vulnerable on the break in the past. Wenger said to us the other day that he thinks that going to three in the back means that they are less vulnerable on the break than they used to be. So maybe Arsenal. I think that is how Arsenal expect United to play. I think United will. I don't know. I've got a sneaky feeling about Arsenal for some reason. I just think if the big players turn up, I think losing Lacazette is a big blow because his movement is good and Giroud is like a really good target man, but doesn't give them the same cutting edge. But I don't know. I just think Arsenal are going to nick it.
Yeah, I think there's probably the consensus here on this match, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I just kind of elaborating on what Jack said there. I don't think Mourinho really cares which way he plays. Like, it's worked from the past. You know, you mentioned that, a stereotypical way of playing. But I think with the City game at Old Trafford coming up as well, it's an interesting litmus test for United because they could go out tomorrow and play on the break, as Jack says, and nick a 1-0 win or whatever. But that game at Old Trafford in a couple of weeks' time is a real fascinating one because United need to win that. Hands down, regardless of what happens tomorrow, they need to win that.
I think they probably need to win both.
Well, they can't go out against City number one at home and try to catch them on the break. So it'll be interesting to see what he does tomorrow. Jack says he's probably going to try to catch them on the break, sit back. The Emirates is a slightly different place to go, maybe to somewhere like the Etihad or Stamford Bridge, because you can kind of catch Arsenal. They're slightly more vulnerable, and you'll probably see that happen. But again, as Jack said, I think Arsenal will make it there. They've been good at home.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's going to be interesting because, even if you were to look back at some of the fixtures we mentioned earlier, or some of the games between United and Arsenal in the past, be it at Highbury or the Emirates, United have traditionally played on the break there anyway, for the most part. Certainly one of my favourite goals from that fixture was Cristiano Ronaldo's second goal in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And that was one of the great counter-attacking goals we've seen in the last few years. So we'll have to see. Jack, thanks a million for your time. We'll speak to you soon. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Cheers, lads. Thanks for having me on. Have a good weekend.
No problem. Cheers. And thanks to you guys for watching at home as well. Our thanks, as always, go to Eirsport. We might finish on a comment here. Graham says, not the same since Eoin jumped all over Van Nistelrooy. Man United versus Spurs, a bigger game now. That's fair enough from Graham. Keep your comments coming in. We'll be picking a winner later on this evening. So even if you're watching this on delay or whatever, if you want to throw in a prediction or something like that, we are giving away a copy of 6 in Copperface Jacks. €10 in. €10 in. Free drink, grub,
book.
Quiz, book. You get a book as well.
And you can stay in Coppers for the night.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
No queuing.
No queuing. We'll see you there at some stage. Hopefully not in too bad a condition. Cheers, and until next week, take it easy.